Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Terry Fletcher.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Steel City Underground WTF What the Football podcast. It's week 12 in the NFL, and boy, do we have a What the Football week. So the Steelers, as you know, have not even played yet. And I just have to rant for a little bit. If there has not been a week that has been a What the Football, this would be it in week 12. So here's where we're at with this. So the Steelers, as you know, were supposed to play on Thanksgiving in prime time against the Ravens. This was a talked about game. The Ravens have been struggling lately. And at 7-3, we're coming in at 10-0, and it was definitely, and we've already beat them, so it was definitely something that we were really looking forward to, especially being prime time and on a holiday with everything going on in the world. Well, it got pushed. Why? Because one of the assistant strength and conditioning coaches on the Ravens, who they've since disciplined, did not follow protocols, and several people were exposed. Up to 12 ended up on the COVID list for the Ravens, and not all at once. That's where we're at now as of this podcast recording. But to accommodate that whole thing, and they said it was in the spirit of safety. Okay, we could buy that. It was unfortunately pushed to Sunday. Again, we were going to have to be in the mix of all the 1 o'clock games Eastern time. So we were kind of upset about that. But then they said, well, this is safety, right? Okay, so then they said, well, actually the Ravens have had more positives. So now the Sunday game is being switched now to Tuesday. And don't forget, we're now going to be on a short week. We, meaning the Steelers, is going to be on a short week because we have the Washington football team. That would be 4 days later. Well, then because of the positives and continued positives in Baltimore, and I have to say we only had one. We did have James Conner that got put on there. We did have two coaches that were not sick, but had tested positive and are not on any kind of list that they're just saying for illness. But the Ravens continue to have more and more positives. So they pushed it then to Tuesday. Well, then apparently they said that they had one more positive, but it was not a player that was an impact player. And again, remember, this is not supposed to be about competition, so that shouldn't even be a conversation. And we'll get to what Denver had to deal with this weekend after that. But apparently they had a players-only call, and then they had a call between the NFL and the NFLPA, which was today, as the date I'm recording this, and they said that they had to have at least one practice, and they were starting to refuse to play. So the NFL, not accommodating the 49ers, not accommodating Denver without a quarterback, not accommodating any other team who's had to deal with this, but accommodating the Raiders, have now pushed the Steeler game back to Wednesday at 3:40 Eastern time, which I'm in California. So for me, that is like a kindergarten nap time break at 12:40 in the afternoon, which nobody's going to be watching because they're working. And I mean, I guess people are just going to have to record it. And it's on NBC. And why isn't it in the middle of the day? At least get us a primetime game like we had Tuesday and on Thanksgiving. Because the New York City Rockefeller Center Christmas tree lighting ceremony is going to be on TV on Wednesday night, and unfortunately the Steelers game does not trump a Christmas tree lighting ceremony. So, I mean, this is almost like somebody saying to us, psych, but I can't tell you how annoyed I am because, and it's not just me, there are a lot of media people out there, there are a lot of fans out there now, that there's one thing to do this because of safety, absolutely. But when this was announced that, again, they were going to refuse to play, well, then if you refuse to play, guess what? The Steelers show up and you're not there, we win. You know, we show up, that's not us forfeiting, that's you forfeiting the game. But the second thing is that if this was truly about safety, and this is where my problem is because I'm in the medical field, why are they allowed to, on a Monday night, able to go back into their facility and practice? That's not safety. That means that it's safe enough to practice. Well, let's get into the WTF of what happened in Denver this past weekend. It was so sad for them. They had a basically a quarterback room that was exposed. And so they had no active quarterbacks. So they went to their practice squad and went to a player with the last name Hinton. And he was undrafted rookie wide receiver, not even a quarterback. And basically, they ended up losing their game, and it was kind of a blowout. It was really sad. But, I mean, this is just not even fair. I mean, that was a Saints game, 31-3. I can't believe they even scored any points. It was because of a takeaway from the defense. But that poor kid being thrown out there, and what was interesting is prior to that game, they said some of the players had never even met him before. So you let that happen to the Denver Broncos. You've got the 49ers who found out that because of Santa Clara County in Northern California, due to COVID and the spikes in that county, they can't play at their home field for their home games the next 2 to 3 weeks. So they actually are homeless and they have to play. They were nice enough to get accommodated by the Arizona Cardinals. They're going to let them play at their field for their 2 home games in December, but they're going to have to be basically on the road for the rest of the year. And again, this is not, the NFL is not supposed to be biased. They're not supposed to favor one team or the other. And I'm trying to figure out how do the Steelers, 10-0 Steelers, storied franchise, how do they get to not have some say in this? Because now Dobbins and Mark Ingram come back because it's a Wednesday game. So not only are the Ravens getting favored in all this, and I don't care if you think this is my opinion. This is a WTF podcast. This is an opinion of a lot of personnel out there and the media. And I'm seeing, Gary Dulac, and I'm seeing Dave Lawley. All of these people are out there just going, you have got to be kidding me. Talk about setting a bad optic for letting a team bully the NFL and bully the commissioner and not realizing that this is a domino effect. Where's Jerry Jones in all this? His game got pushed. Now there's 3 Monday night games because our Washington football game against them got pushed to next Monday. But we have been waiting basically on call for a week as far as when are the Steelers going to play? And for anybody that's saying, well, they've had this week off. No, they haven't. Getting time off, knowing that you actually get time off, is different than getting a day off of practice here and there, waiting to find out if you have to play. I'm a nurse by trade, and I was on call in the ER many, 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 many nights where they're like, hey, you're off for the next 12 hours, but keep your pager on because we may need to call you in. That's not being off. You don't get restful sleep. You don't get to do anything. You're not going anywhere. Even though people have to be self-contained, it's still the situation where you're not resting. You're basically just not practicing, and you're not playing a game waiting to see what another team is going to do. So I will probably end that rant there until week 13, but I have to tell you, this really, really bothers me that the Ravens were allowed to do this. I just think that is a bad optic for the NFL, and there were things put in place that if a team couldn't play and it wasn't supposed to be about competition, then they shouldn't play. And I don't want our guys to lose. I don't want the Steelers to lose a paycheck, which is what happens if you forfeit. Both of the teams do. And I don't really think the Rooneys would let that happen. But to me, I think not only should the Ravens be penalized, but they should be coughing up those game checks. So this really bothers me, because what happens if by some chance, and I really believe we're going to win that game, but what happens if we don't? I mean, there's an asterisk there for that game. And I just think that what's happening is really just slanted to one team, and that's just not good business. So I'm not really sure what now a game where, the country can't even watch unless you're off that day, and it's going to be more recorded games. So that's really sad to me that happened. Okay, so let's back to what's going else around the league. What's going on? So in one of our Thanksgiving games, and, these games, whether it be Detroit, where they really talk about confusion. There was the third quarter, 17-3, 4-1 delay of game. And then the offense back on the field, then came off to punt and then came back on again. I mean, talk about a WTF moment. What are you doing? And Matt Patricia was fired after the game for Detroit. But J.J. Watt did have a pick six, so good for him. We always like a little bit of Watt in our WTF moments. And so the GM also in Detroit was fired. We knew that was coming. We just weren't sure when that was going to happen. And then continuing with let's go back to that Dallas game. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching this Dallas game, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, what in the football was that? You're down by 4 and you take a punt, or you fake a punt deep in your own territory. I mean, just seriously, WTF, people. You know, Jerry Jones' head had to explode because that made no sense, and it didn't work. All it took was one play for the other team to basically, Washington, to just basically take the ball and score. And it was an embarrassing game for Dallas. I mean, just to be beaten like that, it was just really sad. I mean, 41 points, you know, you've got from Alex Smith on the other side. So let's go to Denver. So they had no available quarterbacks on Sunday, again, because of the protocol and being exposed and all that. So Hinton, who basically, he went 1 for 9 with 2 interceptions and only had 1 completed pass the entire game. He actually got the game ball because they were happy he wasn't scared when he went in. But it was sad to me because they really lobbied just to get 1 extra day so that they could have 1 practice with somebody who at least appeared to be a quarterback. And the NFL said, no, play the game. But again, let's go back to the Ravens. Why aren't they saying that to the Ravens who are begging for a practice? I'm really salty about this, guys. I just can't even help it. So let's look at some of the other games around the league. Now, the Dolphins beat the Jets 20-3. So the Jets are now 0-11, and Gase still has a job. I'm not really sure what they're going to do with Darnold because he played terrible. So for anybody out there that keeps saying that he should come to the Steelers, can you stop that narrative? No, he shouldn't. He's terrible. We don't need that. No. But the Patriots and the Cardinals. Now, this one is really hard for me because I really, really like what they're doing down in Arizona. And now that my daughter moved down there, she is a big fan of that, even though she's always got her heart with Steelers. And I hate to root for the Patriots because I'm not a Bill Belichick fan, but we really needed to have just an interesting game there. And the Pats did beat the Cardinals 20-17. It was a game-winning field goal again, but there's just no way I see either of these two teams getting very far. Yes, Kyler Murray's amazing, but they just struggle every single game. I mean, it's always the last play of the game until the clock runs out. The Panthers and the Vikings, that was in the last drive. I actually turned that game off because the Vikings were playing so terrible. And so at that point, you just say, okay, put on red zone. But then I come back and I find out the Vikings actually won 28-27 with the last drive and, again, a game-winning field goal. Now, the Browns were talking some smack against the Steelers who beat the Jags last week. And we have to say, oh, well, yeah, you beat the Jags too, but you only beat them by 2 points, 27-25. Not the blowout that the Steelers had against them at 27-3. So just saying, be careful what you say all the time because it could come back to get you. Now, I know John Gruden isn't happy. He even said, boy, we had a terrible game, and now they're 6-5. I thought the Raiders actually looked like a legit team, but the Falcons, who are now 4-7, beat them 43-6. What else can you say? It was just a really bad game. But here's the interesting thing. So because of Lamar Jackson, who was obviously on COVID, he was the one that was on the list. And I think that's the whole orchestrated thing that's going on here. They want the MVP playing games, which I just think, okay, I'll stop on the soapbox, but let me tell you something. This is the what the football week for me. So he is on one of my fantasy teams. I got Ben on both of the other ones. But because he was on the bench, I picked up Goff, and I thought, okay, he did well last week, but something told me that he just wasn't going to do well. Well, oh my gosh, 3 minutes before game time start, I picked up Phillip Rivers instead. Goff had one of the worst games he's ever had. He had fumbles, he had interceptions, and it was just seriously just horrible. And the 49ers ended up winning 23-20 over the Rams, and Goff didn't even throw a touchdown. So he ended up with -5 on fantasy. Boy, did I dodge a bullet on that one. And then the Chiefs Bucks, that was kind of a hyped game all week. And I think, the biggest game, on the card this week, they really believed was that game since our game. So, and I keep saying our, and I know that our leader, Joe Kuzma, hates it when we do that here at Steel City Underground, but I love my Steelers. And so for me, it's our game. But with notwithstanding the Steeler game that got pushed, the other game that everybody was talking about was the basically the Chiefs and Bucks, because again, that is Patrick Mahomes going against Tom Brady, and Tom Brady's got a lot of weapons, but he looks old. He looks like he should have retired last year. He's not on the same page with his receivers, and between Godwin and Mike Evans, and now he's got Antonio Brown, I mean, how can you not be? But here's something interesting about that game. And I don't even think you would have remembered it or you probably missed it unless you were thinking about it. So remember who were playing against each other. Le'Veon Bell, he was part of, mostly on the bench, but he's part of the Chiefs now. And Antonio Brown, he's part of the Bucs. So it basically was a Bell against Brown game. But Le'Veon Bell had 1 carry for 8 yards. And this team goes up and down the field. And Antonio Brown was 1 target with no catches as they just get stuffed. So both of those players have become absolutely irrelevant. And again, it's my opinion, I think Brady needs to retire. He said when he doesn't play well anymore, that's what he's going to do. I'd be surprised if he comes back next year. Now, the one thing in the Browns game, okay, yeah, they won. Okay, I'll give them that, but 27-25. But, if you watch the game, they're not going to keep winning games if they keep doing these boneheaded things. You've got Chubb and Hunt, and you're going for it on 4th down and basically in inches, and then you throw the ball. Then why aren't you running it when it's 3rd down? Why aren't you running it when you can do what you can? The clock management in that game and what they should have been running was terrible. So let's just see how long they last out there. I think they're just throwing a big party because they're 8-3 now, and they just have never been that way. They said since 1969. So that was definitely a crazy game, for no question. So we are now playing Wednesday. Don't forget, make sure you set your VCR. It's on NBC. I really hope it goes. And I really hope also that my fantasy football counts, because I've got 6 players on one league, 7 players on another, because we also pick defensive players, and it's Yahoo said it's going to count, but so we'll see. Otherwise, talk about a terrible week for fantasy football. But hopefully we get this game played. I'm hoping with all get out that we get a win from it. And I also hope that we get a little bit of snow. It's supposed to snow when we had the Tuesday schedule, and now it's supposed to clear up by Wednesday. So we'll see what happens. But everyone, make it a great week, and just pray that we're going to have a game that finishes up week 12 and then into week 13, that our game actually goes off as well. So this is Terry Fletcher signing off to Steel City Underground, What the Football podcast. And until week 13, have a great week.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.